Hello and welcome to another episode of English Podcast with Paul. So, today, food, food and culture. How important is food? Many people think that food is really important and is the basis for many aspects of their life. Other people that are really productive, really focused, often feel that food is just a necessity to keep you going and keep you moving forward, keep you sustained throughout the day. Okay, let's take a little bit of a dive in and see what we come up with. All right, so one of the first things, as I said before, unedited, unscripted, but I do have some notes. So these are my notes here. All right, so UNESCO World Heritage Sites now add other things, non-tangible things to World Heritage. Okay, so one of those things they add now is couscous. Couscous. Um, they also add food, festivals, activities, and other important things of culture. All right, okay. So couscous was suggested by North African nations of Algeria, Mauritania, Morocco, and Tunisia. So I went to Morocco and had couscous, and it was beautiful. It was really amazing. So obviously here they're talking about couscous made from wheat or barley, ground using a millstone, made into very small balls by hand and steamed into a special pot, and also has a space for cooking meat and vegetables. Okay, couscous is traditionally made by women and is eaten in both normal meals and at special events like weddings and parties. Okay, so couscous is a big main staple for a large part of the population. It's obviously very easy to make and grow, and it seems to be quite affable for most people's bodies. Most people's guts and intestines seem to agree with couscous, unlike other foods that we'll get onto in a moment. So interesting that a food has now been added to the World UNESCO Heritage site, I guess. Site not as in a place, but as in like a website. Right, so that's very interesting. Okay, what's the next one we've got here? The next one, food tourism. All right, so again, another interesting topic, how eating is the new sightseeing. There's a lot of talking about you go into different countries and you try out the street food and you get to know the country by the street food. Yeah, that's some people's particular preferred method. Often street food is cheaper, often it's more in regards connected with culture and the local people. There's a few things connected there. Also, when traveling, often you'll see young tourists, backpackers eating the street food, trying to get a flavor for the culture. Okay. Um, HelloFresh found that 74% of Americans who have traveled in the last 5 years went for food. Okay, so as we know with the internet and traveling, food is often talked about in regards to a country or a people or a culture. Oh yeah, we like to get Chinese food, we like to get Italian food, we like to get African food or whatever. You often talk about a favorite food by the country it's from or from the culture it's from. So yeah, there's a whole industry now based around food tourism. It's a real big thing. Interesting. All right, and you can book specific holidays based around these food requirements and food tours around a particular city or country. Again, very interesting, very interesting. Right, the next one, infants with pets. So if you have a pet, it says, then your child is much less likely to get a food allergy. So the connection of maybe your dog or your cat bringing in germs and bringing in other more familiar germs, if there's not a better word than germs, making things more common, more known to the body, will help it in the future and be more resistant to unhealthy bacteria or unhealthy, I can't think of the right word, germs, for want of a better word, that get into your body. That's obviously another issue in regards that they say that if your mother gives birth naturally, a lot of the bacteria gets passed on to the child, and so that builds up a stronger immunity. They also say that we're now in more of a germ phobia culture, because when we were children, many of us older people, when we were children, we played in the mud, we played outside, and we had quite a resistance to bacteria. And it's very similar ideology that when you have a puppy or a child, you introduce it to many new things as you can while it's young. So not just the body gets used to it, but also the brain and the social side aspect. Introducing lots of new interesting sounds and environments, supposed to help the brain grow, help the body grow. And like you say, if you take your child to the beach or your dog to the beach, and then you take it to the woods, and then you take it to the city, all these different things help the brain and body and the memory grow in lots of different ways. And I'm guessing that's very similar and have lots of parallels here to bacteria and microorganisms and potential nutrients that the body's going to get or find that's not good. So I guess that's what they're saying here in regards to having a pet is going to help your child less likely to have allergies. Interesting. Okay. But that being said, I've got a small intolerance for gluten and wheat. Yeah, I always had pets as a child, even from very, very young. So that's not 100% proof, I guess. But nevertheless, food, interesting part of our culture. All right. What's the next one we got here? Bugs. Bugs are the new food. Now, for tourists and travelers, it's often quite entertaining and exciting to see new foods and new cultures. And we see it on the TV sometimes how some countries and some cultures like eating bugs. Maybe it's snakes, or maybe it's cockroaches, or centipedes, or something else that has been told to be very high in protein. And we all know, as monkeys and as apes, they eat little grubs that they find around. So that is a very interesting part of what we find interesting and what we find kind of a bit bleh and disgusting. Other people find interesting and exciting. So yes, you can do tours and traveling. And from my own perspective, I've seen it in Asia, where you can buy it from a street vendor on a skewer that's been cooked. Maybe a small snake or a tarantula or cockroaches or something like that. You know, obviously been cooked. Sometimes it has spices on it, and is very new and exciting and different. So there's another part of culture and food. Okay, moving on. Flavonoids. Flavonoids in food may protect the brain as we age. So this new article now is talking about the parts of food and the different antioxidants, maybe in berries or in spices and chilies, to really help with reducing anti-inflammatory. So if you go back to many millenniums ago, hundreds of years ago, there wasn't really such a thing as a proper pharmaceutical doctor, but more your witch doctor or your local village doctor that would have prescribed you herbal medicines. And that is where we get a lot of our medicines from these days. They come from plants. All right, now they're scientifically measured to give out the right amount of chemicals or combination that the doctor says our body needs. But originally they would have been just chewed up plant or broken up plant or digested plant in liquids or whatever else. So many of the anti-inflammatory elements from pharmaceuticals came from plants, and that's what it's talking about here in regards to flavonoids from what was it, from, what are they called, like jalapeno peppers and things like that, and spices. Research in the US have now looked into how flavonoids may affect cognitive performance as we age. The study, published in the Journal of Neurology, hang on, let's get this down a bit. Used data from 961 people in Chicago, aged 60 to 100, following them for an average of just under 7 years. Participants completed surveys about their diets and took cognitive tests every year. The researchers found a higher consumption of flavonoids was associated with slower decline in overall cognitive function, as well as some aspects of mental abilities. Okay, so that's a very interesting study. Flavonoids. So often cognitive breakdown is also connected with lack of flexibility and using your brain in as it gets older, because we're not working, so we don't stretch our brain to learn new things or work out a problem and take that time. So our brains can often, if you don't use it, you lose it. Yeah, to that aspect. So this is an interesting study that sort of sheds some new light on how our brains change over time. All right. Even in coffee, beer and wine. I don't recommend that. I recommend fruits and vegetables, but there's another story. Yeah, so I like that. I like that study. It opens up another avenue to talk about how foods can help us. On the flip side of that, playing devil's advocate, well, I'll save that to the end. All right, moving on. The next one, foods for better health. So again, this one, same sort of thing, but we're talking about emotional and mental health, and we're talking more about vegetables, nutrition, balanced diet, yada, 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 lifting your mood. So they're talking here more about how junk food and fatty foods can have a negative effect on your behavior. Study affect the omega-3 fatty acids on human health. These fatty acids mainly found in fish oils, but they're also available in some veg oils and foods like walnuts. But eating healthy fats is not enough. Well, I know there's lots of other things about eating dark vegetables and things like that. But yeah, eating unhealthy food, all that salt, in order to communicate with the synapses. Okay, hang on, let me just read this. The brain is made up of fat. It is made up of chemicals that talk to each other and that are lubricated by fat in order to communicate across the synapses and contribute to our ability to focus, to apply attention and to lift our mood. Right, okay, so that's where it's going on. So yeah, we're talking about fuel and fats. Okay. Writing about a book. Yeah, so we do need fats. And talking of fats, I myself ingest fat, and what I found is the best fat to induce, no, get it right. The best fats to take on board is very healthy fats. I think there's a difference between monosaturates and polyunsaturates, and I think the monosaturates, such as walnuts, and the oil that I chuck in with everything, and now my wife cooks solely with it, is extra virgin olive oil. So this is much better than sunflower oil or vegetable oil, because the extra virgin olive oil has a lot lower level of breaking down in regards to maintaining some of those antioxidants and all that good stuff. All that good stuff is basically still kept in extra virgin olive oil. It isn't manipulated as much. And that's why they say people from the Mediterranean have a healthier diet, because of the olives and the margarines and the fats they consume are much, much healthier. So that's the only fat I recommend, and the only fat I knowingly and purposefully ingest. obviously occasionally I have avocados and like I mentioned, walnuts. So very interesting that negative fats, especially, oh, don't get me started on junk food and some of the fats, the trans fats from animal fats, the negative aspects of those and how they break down and can be carcinogenic. That's a whole nother story. But it's interesting how junk food for the few moments lifts your brain up, you know, and gives you that endorphin rush, you know, that excitement. You know, like if you have a donut, because of the sugar and the fat and the salt, really sets your taste buds alive. That's obviously a big reason why we eat a lot of this junk food, because it tastes good, because our tongues and our brains says, oh yes, we need this to stay alive. But it's just our brain from thousands of years ago saying that we need a little bit of salt and we need a bit of sugar and we need a bit of fat. So that's just our brains tricking us, and that's why we get those endorphins. That's why we get those chemical highs. But the ones that we're talking about here from junk food is very short-lived, and then you end up with a big spike in your adrenal glands, and you had a big spike in your insulin. So the major issue here with the insulin from these junk foods is that the insulin spikes really high and then drops right the way down. Whereas if you eat fruit and veg, and especially sugars from fruit, fructose, the sugar level and the insulin level are so much more gentle, so much more natural and better for your body. So I think that's a big part of that. All right, food. Okay, moving on. So what's this one talk about? Hassa, this must be the person we're talking about, found that some healthy foods were also causing her some problems with her joint pain from inflammation. Could be sensitive to peppers, tomatoes, or eggplant. Okay, so that's kind of the opposite to the benefits of anti-inflammatory. So she uses a lot of green vegetables, spices, citrus in her cooking. Anti-inflammatory. So that's very opposite, a very different approach. So this one's talking about, I think it's a professor, Amanda Hass, is a professional cook, and they're talking about medicine from food, and how food can really change your body's, what's the word, ecostasis. So that's something I believe in a lot. Often in the West here, you go to the doctor with your ailments, and they'll say, "Oh, what's the diagnosis?" And the doctors in the UK often have been given very little or no training whatsoever in nutrition. Don't get me started on nutritionists, but that's another story. So a doctor won't ask you questions about your environment or your nutrition. So you could be, I don't know, eating lots and lots and lots of junk food and becoming very spotty and having acne. And so sometimes there may be advice, there may be a conversation, but more often it's just a prescription. There you go, take these pills, that'll fix it. So I don't know if it's just our culture, but more often doctors and GPs are prescribing things to fix the symptoms, to fix the problems on a surface level, like putting a little plaster on something. So there's often a bigger cause, a bigger issue. You know, you could be feeling ill for this or feeling that, and it may be something a lot more environment than you imagine. It could be the amount of alcohol you consume. It could be the amount of junk food you consume. It could be the amount of wheat and gluten you consume. But that is a conversation very rarely discussed in the health side of things, in the health industry. It is more about what pills can we make, what can we prescribe the next person. So I really like the old school way of nutrition, in regards that if you're not feeling very well, or if you're having some symptoms of something, then look at what you're eating first of all. That would be the first point of call for me. What am I eating? Does that not agree with my body? Is that not helping? For example, not so long ago, I realized I was in a hot country, And I thought that I would need extra salt because I was sweating a lot being in this very hot tropical country. And so my food naturally became more salty. Thinking I'm sweating, I need more salt. And then all of a sudden I noticed my ankles were really swollen and puffy. And I talked to my wife about it and we looked at it. And then we thought, well, let's just see. We'll try it in an experiment and take salt out of it. Because I Googled it, as you do, Google the doctor. You always Google everything first. And we decided to stop. Oh, well, I decided to stop taking salt in my diet, reduce it completely. And within 3 days, it had gone away. So now I have very minimal salt. Well, I'm back in a cold country now, but I still keep salt to a minimum because that was a kind of an obvious correlation between the food I consumed and my body reacting very quickly. And as I mentioned in other videos, I have a very similar thing with gluten. Maybe I have a slight wheat intolerance, but since I stay away from gluten and I avoid it as much as possible, occasionally I'll be naughty and have something with wheat in it, but generally I avoid it. And my body is so much healthier and happier for it. So that's another aspect. Sharing a bit too much maybe now. All right, moving on then to the next one. All right, so what does this one say? This one says, findings could change the advice doctors and governments and agencies provide to their patients and general public. Co-author, blah, 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 of Massachusetts General Hospital, Harvard, big names. Studies show individuals that consume high amounts of animal-based proteins had a somewhat higher risk of mortality, in particular cardiovascular mortality. This is kind of a bit what I said earlier about trans fats and other fats that are consumed and things we put into our body. And then it talks about obesity. Also, there's obviously a correlation between people that eat junk food and their lifestyle and what they tend to be like. Stereotypical image of somebody that eats a lot of junk food often has less of a balanced approach to the rest of their lifestyle. Okay, so that one's interesting. But then again, it talks about increasing plant proteins, nuts, seeds, beans, tofu, and things like that. So there are many countries, and this is where we're going back now, full circle. There are many countries that really believe in eating more whole foods and whether or not those foods are a reflection of their culture, often being a more poverty reasons and poverty countries that tend to stick closer and often more healthier to the more whole foods and basic foods such as your couscous, your beans, your chickpeas, and I eat a lot of chickpeas, and tofu. Tofu is more, I don't know, maybe it's more modern, but I eat tofu as well. It really bulks things out and it has lots of positive attributes and effects. So a lot of these cultures really connected with the food of their local area, and it really helps define some cultures in what they eat, what they grow, how they live their life, and how it affects their body and their longevity. So it's interesting. You can look at a whole world by different aspects of the food they eat. I mean, for example, Asia, like I said before, they eat lots and lots of rice, and they're kind of addicted to it. A bit like a baby cow is addicted to cow's milk because of the casein in it that makes the calf come back time and time again to get the milk from its mother, so it becomes bigger and stronger and able to fend for itself and run away from predators. The casein. Hence why a lot of humans are addicted to cheese and milk, because of the casein. There's another story. So food and cultures, you can make a map around the world of different foods and that are connected with their cultures and how that defines the way a culture moves. So they also say an army, especially taking over the different countries or colonialism, an army is run on its stomach. And so for Westerners, often it is potato, so it's a starch. And when for Asia, the starch would be rice. And then the starch in maybe African countries would be chickpeas or beans, that help them sustain themselves. Very interesting. I'm not so sure what they eat so much in the Viking days and the Viking cultures. That would be interesting. So yeah, it's really interesting to view the world in foods and from whereabouts they are. I'll go say, so right, the negative effects. So let's look at play devil's advocate again and then look at the negative effects. The negative effects of this is that many healthy countries are often poor countries because they've stuck to more whole foods, more basic foods, which is really, really good for their body. But as a culture and a country becomes more financially affluent, so more Western foods come in, or more unhealthy foods come in, or foods of the kings. For a little story, we have a thing in the West here called gout. And it's when your legs or feet inflame or you become very bloated in particular areas. And that was often called an illness of kings. And because it was to do with the richness of the amount of red wine and red meats. And so that was always connected to being wealthy, of having gout. But gout is obviously a very bad and serious illness that can really affect your life and shorten your life. So, and we've seen these things happen in modern day now. Also, you look at places like, and forgive me if I get this wrong, but like Hawaii. And now Hawaii and some of those countries have really moved over the decades more affluently, and how people used to show off with how they could buy these Western foods like McDonald's and things like this. And so how they've become very quick at gaining weight as a culture. You just go to the UK and you can see hundreds of people on mobility scooters because they're overweight and obese. And the same with America and Australia. It is so easy to become obese and overweight because we are so far away from the whole foods. So maybe food is like a medicine. Maybe the healthier, less wealthy countries have got something bonus, something better than us Western countries. So, yeah, interesting. Whole foods, that's the way to go. So that's both sides and a complete circle coming back to the beginning again. And food and how it affects culture, how it affects the body. So let me know in the comments below what you think about different cultures, different countries, different places, and your favorite dish, your favorite cuisine. Everybody seems to have the favorite. You know Paris from the croissant and the baguette. You know Italy from the spaghetti and the pizzas. You know Germans from the sausages, the big German sausage. Well, this is my brain and my geography speaking. You may have a whole different idea. I think of Asia for rice, you know, and Vietnam for their coffee, and lots of other different places for different cuisines. I find it fascinating. I really do like that map in my head of different foods from around the world. And whenever I visit somewhere new, again, I think about that food and go, yeah, is it true? Does the Chinese food taste so much better in Asia than what it does when you buy it from a Chinese takeaway? That's what they say. Fascinating. So that's something we could talk about for hours and hours and hours. And I want to know more. So let me know in the comments what your favorite food is, what your favorite dish is, and does your culture reflect in the cuisine of your people? Okay, let me know that in the comments. So that's all we have time for today. Like I said, open conversation. Let's discuss these things. And as always, have fun. Keep talking English. Keep looking at ways of making it happy, engaging, and listening to English language. All right? It's easy. It's very easy to allow English to flow into your life. The more you listen to it on podcasts, on radios, on TVs, the more it will sink and dribble into your brain. And it's easier to become more fluent because you'll have this vocabulary in the back of your mind. And so it'll build. So it's so easy to do. Just keep listening, keep having fun, and keep speaking yourself, especially in a shower or when you're in the car. Just dance and sing, but focus when you're in the car. Focus. Okay. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time. Take care. And as always, keep learning and laughing and having fun with English. Bye for now.